Geek Out! Look, up in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's a podcast about Superman. Welcome back. However I start this episode, I can never remember, but that's okay. Welcome back to another episode of the Superman Sessions with, I'm Jake and my buddy Sam, the co-host over here. Sam.
I'm Sam.
Yeah, say hello to the kid, Sam. Anyway, so we have another guest for you, and I have not talked to this guest on mic since 1975's Dress to Kill, I think it was. We haven't talked in 42 years.
The only Kiss album my father owns.
But like I said, just a quick background if you guys did not listen to that episode.
Shame on you if you didn't.
Shame on you, you fucks. My buddy Kyle, we met at the comic shop I used to work at way back when. We started off playfully, I think, butting heads about everything. Like, we disagree with each other on everything. I think just to be for fun, to keep it lively. And then one day we were like, yeah, but we both like Judge Dredd. And we were like, oh shit, we both like Judge Dredd. And then because it's few and far between finding like Dredd heads, man. So we kind of bonded on that, and then everything else after that, we're like, oh wait, we actually agree on everything. And so anytime he'd come in like a Wednesday to pick up his books or whatever, it'd always be like that last hour he'd come in or whatever, and it'd fly by.
Hour would be like 2 hours.
Yeah. Oh shit, we're closed. And then we'd be talking about everything that was new coming out that week. Whether it was Superman, which of course we're going to get into, Marvel, DC, Star Wars, all that kind of stuff. And so always helped the time go by, and it was always nice whenever Kyle came through the door. So anyway, Kyle is back on. Mr. Kyle Matthews, thank you for coming back on the show, sir.
Oh, I've been waiting a long time, especially now to have the pleasure of sitting with the one and only Sam Stone.
That's right. The legend himself, Samuel Warren Stone.
Ghost Who Walks.
Yeah, the ghost who walks. Yeah. Oh, Phantom, baby. But no, Kyle was one of the first guys, again, like I had, like when I was like, I'm going to do a Superman podcast, pretty much everyone you've heard so far were like the names that came rushing in my head immediately. And Kyle and I, it was no surprise we had good chemistry on the Dress to Kill stuff because the comic shop days. And I knew that he's a fan of old soups. So, he's the guy we wanted to talk to. So, Kyle, as we've kind of talked about with the past guest, give us kind of your background to comics in general, but also kind of your earliest memories of coming across Superman. Whether it was comics or TV, cartoons, movies, whatever.
Well, comics. I got in kind of like most people. Just hanging around a comic shop and being a kid, not have the money to buy them. You just hang in there all day long, reading whatever you can.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I didn't really like a lot of DC as a kid because I started early 90s, and I think like most people have said on here, for me the first Superman was the Death of Superman.
Of course,
that was I was 10 when that came out. But really for Superman himself, it was Christopher Reeves. That movie was like, for me, oh my God, first real superhero movie. Then a little bit, after that, you had, Batman, but, Superman and Christopher Reeves was, for me, everything. And even Superman 2, Superman 3.
Yeah.
The
list goes on.
I noticed you didn't mention Superman 4.
He just wished that out of existence.
Superman 4. I've tried to block that out of my memory with what was it, Nuclear Man and his leap that's on nails.
Yes,
that's the one.
But yeah, so the Superman comics, I never, after Death of Superman, wasn't really much for me until I got older, because I think it was the 90s comics were not great. Period. Like across the board. I got into a lot of more of the art on the comic side, and if you were into art and comics in the 90s, that was like key because you had Jim Lee,
sure, the superstars, yeah.
Yeah, you had a lot.
Basically, everyone that founded Image.
Yeah.
Yeah, Image Comics, and it was essentially that. It was about the image, and the images were phenomenal, but a lot of the stories were awful. And that's just my opinion. Because then you had, this, I know a lot of people, were kids for it and they got into it, but the whole splitting of Superman into like blue and red, that's when I was like, I'm out. Like that's not for me. Like I want my Superman to just be Superman.
The funny thing is, I don't know if you're aware of this. The studio, we actually have a poster of electric blue Superman that stares at us.
Yeah, it's been staring at me for 3 fucking years. Just to remind me that
I don't know. It just never struck a chord with me. Like I don't know. It just felt like for me it was jumping the shark.
Well, like speaking of Superman in comics, and it is funny because all the people we've had on here have been pretty. We've been pretty close in age. All the people we've had on the show, and we've all referenced, particularly Superman 75. The death of Superman. Those great splash pages. Do you remember kind of your mindset when you saw that? Because we've talked about it here on the show in the past. Like Superman's dead, and it's not just dead. He's beat down.
I remember even the news at the time because it was such a big deal. Like they're killing Superman, and it was like, what? You can't kill Superman. Like it's not possible. And I remember that was actually even one of the first comics I even bought with my own money. And I remember getting the sleeve, the protective, the black protective cover that it comes in with the bleeding red Superman logo, and I was just like, oh my god, this is like the coolest thing ever. And even for because the hype around it and just everything about it was like, oh my god, this is actually happening. They're actually going to kill Superman, and oh my god, they killed Superman. Superman's dead. But even the funny thing about it was that was also my first real intro to comic fandom of, oh wow, they can't stick to Superman being dead. Because I think it was not, I don't know how many issues, but it was not much long after, the return of Superman. It was like, wait, he's not dead? He's coming back? And that kind of made me go, oh, well, I guess nobody stays dead forever except Uncle Ben. But yeah, like that was kind of really the first, oh my god, this is big. This is the first big comic thing I had ever been a part of, and it was really awesome, actually. And I wish I kept it. I was a terrible handler of my comics at my young age.
You can get like copies of Superman number 75 for like $1.
Yeah, but it's not the same as
not the OG.
I had it when it hit the shelves, and it was it was one of the first original copies, and I got it, and the whole buying it myself and everything, and if I can go back in time, I'd slap my young self like, take better care of these things. But yeah, like it was something else. It was a huge, because I remember the shop that I bought it. It was a shop called Who's on First,
nice.
which was like to me the greatest comic book shop name. It was a play on the Abbott and Costello, because they also sold sports memorabilia and all that. Mm-hmm. But and sadly actually closed a year ago.
Oh wow!
But like that was like one of my absolute biggest comic memories of my life, was buying that comic book.
Yeah. It's funny, like, just doing this podcast, like, how, our generation, how big that comic book was, because all of us have stories about, making my dad drag me to the comic store, because I would have been, six or seven when that came out.
Yeah.
And, my dad's a huge comic fan now, but back then just like didn't get it. Like, why is, there's a lion out the door for this fictional character being killed off? What's the big deal? And yeah, like it left a huge mark on all of us, because this idea, and like I said, how brutal, Superman goes out, and I think that's something that, stuck with us. And, of course, it being the big splash pages being in your face.
Dan Jurgens on art.
Oh, fantastic. And like I said, I've something that's always fascinated me weirdly with that book is like Superman's shirt ripping, like his whole tattered thing. Also weird. I'm like, there's Superman's nipple. That's always been weird to me. I'm like, there's Superman's nipple. That's weird. I don't know why that's
Not
weird
the
to
hairy
me.
chest.
Nah, that makes sense. They all got hairy chests in DC and Marvel stuff. But like, I was like, there's Superman's nipple. Weird. Oh, he's dead. Fuck. But you know that.
But again, like you're saying you were like 6 or 7.
Yeah.
For me, I was 10.
Yeah.
And I would just I don't know. I guess my parents were a little less like, oh, he's gone. Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
But I would literally just walk out of my house, and because my comic shop was not that far from my house, but I would walk out and just go down there every day. And I remember the owner was this guy Jimmy, and he never cared that I just hung, kind of like you guys at the shop. I would just hang in there all day long, just reading comics, and he didn't care. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And that was like again, the whole build up and just seeing it, and it was like I had to have that. And and if you want to go into like the movie aspect, I wish they would have left that for like almost its own movie.
Oh, sure,
instead of trying to cram it into that god awful mess.
Well, yeah. I mean, jump into the movies. I mean, that was something where, I've heard that Henry Cavill's favorite Superman story is the death of Superman or the death and return of Superman, which is a hefty, series to do your homework on because it's huge.
Exactly.
I bought that omnibus from the shop with that gorgeous big hardcover, which has got everything in it. And that thing is, you'd kill somebody with that book.
Yeah.
You'd kill Superman with that book. And then he'd come back because he'd be in a coma, Kryptonian coma. But yeah, I think the thing
Death
with
and sleep of
the
Superman.
death of
Or the
Superman.
sleep and return of Superman.
The sleep of Superman.
The Batman v Superman movie. The thing is, like, that death in that movie is not earned at all because
it felt like it was pointless.
Well, and that's the thing that's too is
it also, like, to me, the whole I've actually watched that movie a lot lately, trying to like it more, and I actually wind up hating it more before I watch it because there's just so much that just it's not to me it's just like the most anti-Superman movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, and so much of in one of the Justice League trailers, there's this great speech that Batman gives about Superman being a beacon of hope.
Mm-hmm.
After the fallout of Superman dying in Batman v Superman. And I remember that trailer dropped at San Diego Comic-Con, and Sam and I were like going to dinner that night, and we were talking about it. And I was like, that speech Batman gives is really great about Superman, but none of that is shown in any of the Zack Snyder movies so far. It's like you can say it, but none of it was shown because this idea of Superman being a beacon of hope, in most of Batman v Superman, people hated Superman. And so when he dies, it's not this celebration of life of Superman. You don't have all of the DC superheroes that have been established in all the films going to the funeral. And you don't have the friendship of Batman, and we'll get into that, but like Batman being, his friend is killed, as instead it's this guilt of, oh, this is a good man that I drove to his death, This
is a good man I was a dick to, and now he's dead. Yeah. And I feel bad now. It's like, it just, that movie from, start to finish, just, there was, I'll give it, there was a few good moments, and you and I have actually talked about Zack Snyder. He always makes great moments in movies, but strung together, they don't make a great movie. Yeah,
you gotta have a story interlocking those moments. That's why his trailers are great. His trailers are great because you can pull any of those scenes like, whoa, that's a great looking scene.
He makes a lot of things look great. Like Sucker Punch. Like I was sold on that trailer immediately, and I was like, oh my god, this is going to be an amazing movie. And then I watched it, and I was like, oh well, there's no story.
Yeah,
it just looks really pretty.
Just visually, he's got an eye for the visuals.
Yeah, and
that's the best sentence ever.
But yeah, it left a lot of sour taste in my mouth, and that's why I haven't seen the Justice League movie, because it's fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, not gonna happen.
Here's the thing.
Because I enjoyed Man of Steel for as many flaws as it had.
Mm-hmm.
It was still, one of the better Superman movies made in recent years. I know everybody's come on here and talked about at ends of Superman Returns which I liked, but it felt too much of, hey, I'm just gonna recreate Dick Donner's, Superman movie.
That'd be the biggest flaw holding it back from really being its own thing.
Yeah, and I think that's what really took me out of it for watching it, was just like, this feels too much of, well, I'm going to make an homage to the Dick Donner movie, and it wasn't enough of, hey, let's just make a Superman movie.
Yeah.
Let's make our own. And I think that's kind of like part of the problems with DC and doing Superman, is that they don't take enough chances of, let's just do the character and what it is. Kind of like, have you guys played the Injustice League game, or the Injustice games?
Yes.
Now, I really love the take of Superman on that. And it's really kind of the whole Superman, if he just loses it. And because I think that's, the biggest quality of Superman is his control. And how he
lives in the world of
doesn't
cardboard.
lose his shit. Yeah. For how awful, trying to save everybody, and how everything is just awful and bad, and just one thing pushed him over, and loses his shit and takes over the world. I thought was just an amazing, amazing story. And if they took chances like that in the live action movies, I think they would pay off.
Yeah, I know you said you haven't seen Justice League. It is the best we've ever seen Cavill Superman by far.
It's wonky jawline aside.
Yeah, mustache CGI.
I've seen that. I have. Yeah. I saw the pirated YouTube videos of his wonderful upper lip.
Yes, it's unfortunate, but it is the best we've seen of this kind of the Cavill era Superman.
The lines he delivers, I'm like, oh shit, it's
Superman. His big return in costume. That moment
with
is
Ben Affleck face.
Yeah, Ben Affleck makes his face like, oh fuck. But it's Cavill Superman is great, and that helps elevate Justice League, and I was very happy to see that. And the movie's actually fun. It's a mess.
I've seen it twice.
Yeah, same. It's a mess. And oddly enough, it's the shortest DC movie that I wish was longer because it kind of ends. You're like, oh shit! Like now they're together.
Yeah, I think we're kind of like we're aside from the fact of being Zack Snyder, and just like then Whedon stepped in, and it just felt like, oh god, is this going to be too much of a mishmash of Zack Snyder and Josh Whedon? And you've kind of heard some reviews from some people that it does feel kind of mixed up. I mean, when it comes to DVD or whatever, I'll probably watch it. I just didn't. It didn't get me enough to go to the movies to see it.
That's fair. And like I said, I do look forward.
Get most people by
that's
that
true.
box office.
Yeah, it's probably not even going to break. I don't think they're saying it's going to break 700 million,
which is lower than Man of Steel.
Yeah, and this is the one when you put everyone together
and more budget.
Yeah, Jesus. But no, Kyle, another kind of reoccurring thing that's kind of happened as talking about Superman is, as much as we might have loved the character as a kid, or even if you didn't love the character as a kid, there was something that seemed to pull us back, if we left Superman. Certainly for me, as much as I kind of talk about not being the biggest fan of the Snyderverse stuff, seeing that Man of Steel trailer before The Dark Knight Rises, and with that music and very little Superman, very little anything in the trailer, and hearing the words of Jonathan Kent in that voiceover kind of struck this chord with me when I was waiting for Batman v Superman, or the Dark Knight Rises, where I was like, oh man, that's like, I haven't like hung out with Superman in a long, long time. And I went to Barnes & Noble afterwards, after the fact, and bought a bunch of Superman books and read them, and I was like, holy shit, like I get it now. When I was a kid, it was because he has all these superpowers. I wish I could fly. I wish I was invulnerable. I wish I didn't have to be scared of, being hurt or, dying, even though death is Superman. But like, this whole idea of like, it was more wish fulfillment as a kid. Like, you wanted to feel like Superman. But then when you get older, you kind of go into the nuances of, it's funny because like as you get older, you get into the nuances of it, like the insecurities of Superman, and you're like, oh, that's what makes Superman interesting. Like that's why for me he's such a human character, and he's the most unhuman of all the the big Justice League, the Justice League really. So what was it? Was there a certain thing that kind of got you back, maybe in the books, or is there a moment, or did you never really leave Superman? Was he always kind of with you from, as a 10-year-old coming across the death of Superman?
I kind of kept with him, because one big thing that if it wasn't the comics, it was the animated series.
Yeah.
Having, everybody, Batman the animated series, that's just a given. But I think the Superman animated series is very underrated in a lot of what it did. And Tim Daly, Wings is Tim Daly.
Wings is Tim Daly.
Wings is Tim Daly, who, outside of live action Superman, is my favorite Superman.
Nice.
He's
great.
And I always wanted Steven Weber to be in some episode.
That would have been so great.
Just to have him, those two go back and forth would have been just pure gold for me, because I love Wings. Wings was one of my, it was weird. I was a weird kid. I loved watching Wings, but yeah, also reading Superman comics. But that show really stuck with me. Especially having the Superman Batman hour on Fox. So that was one big thing. But I think for me now, it wasn't necessarily comics, but it was. I have two children, and my youngest, my son, who's 4. That's. I was back in with comics, but that's really what kind of got me even more now, and I care more about the character being treated better now, because he loves Superman.
Mm-hmm.
We've watched Man of Steel together. We even watched Batman versus Superman, and he kind of, he loves the Superman parts, and I'm just, kind of like, it's not the real Superman, but he got really excited when the moment in the Zack Snyder movie where he takes off.
Sure.
He is going to love the shit out of Justice League.
He will.
So that's kind of what has kept me really back with Superman. But I think the one thing that always keeps me a fan of his is the fact that he wants to fit in, but he doesn't. Kind of being this, essentially an outsider. He's from another planet, and it's the alter ego is a human being, and what he thinks of human beings, and the whole Clark Kent's kind of a stumbling, bumbling fool, but really, Superman is not. He's this big, towering, strong, and I think one thing that gets overlooked is he's really intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
And
he went to college.
Yeah.
He's a superhero. Went to college.
The whole fact of just being that outsider in this world, and aside from Supergirl, one of the last of his kind, and just trying to fit in and just be like everybody else, but he can't. No matter what he does, no matter how hard he tries, he'll never be like anybody else. But he cares, and he cares about everybody else, and he wants to do the right thing no matter what. And especially in today's world, needing someone like that, as Corey had mentioned, in today's world and how the world is and who's running the country, you kind of need a Superman.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're seeing that in everyday people now, kind of being Superman and standing up for what's right and, truth, justice, in the American way, just so to say. That's one thing that's really kind of always stuck with me with him. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, he is a good example for, I think for kids. And I think the idea of it not just being because he's strong and he can run fast and he can fly and
it's more than just the superpowers and, and all that. It's what he stands for. Like, his moral code, and it kind of goes back to the Injustice League game. Like, that's what would happen to Superman if he broke his moral code. He would become essentially a dictator. He could just take over everything, and who's going to stop him?
Yeah.
Whereas, his moral code is everything, whereas Batman is his moral code is a little kind of skewed at times.
Mm-hmm.
He is a vigilante and he kind of takes the law into his own hands, whereas Superman is not that. He tries to do the right thing because it's the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, well, I want to jump into Batman real quick, but before that, I've realized, like, talking to you, you're the first person that we've had on the show who has kids, and so, like you were saying, that, and how important is it, watching, like, the Superman the movie, the Christopher Reeve one, like, and with Smallville the TV show, and with the comics.
I have to admit, and you're probably gonna kill me on this. I've never watched Smallville.
Well, no, I mean, well, it's on Hulu if you have Hulu. And that's a lot of stuff to watch.
It is. I know. I've seen bits and pieces, but I just never really jumped on it.
No, I mean, like, it's understand. That's a huge undertaking. It's 200.
Which I might actually take one of these days.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking,
I actually have to thank you because you're the one that just got me. You and Sam got me onto watching Riverdale.
Oh, what a great freaking show!
Yeah,
what a
absolutely.
Great show.
So I
give me that sexy Archie.
In my search of something to watch, I might actually undertake watching Smallville.
And Smallville is one of those ones where, like, a couple episodes in, there's an episode. I think it's called The Hourglass. I think it's like episode 6 or something. I can't remember exactly. In season 1, that was the episode where the pilot's great, but that was the episode where I was like, oh, okay, I see the end game. I see what they're trying to do with this. Granted, it doesn't need to be 10 seasons. That's fine. Tom Welling is my favorite portrayal of Clark Kent, Superman, whatever you want to call it, on that, because he has the aura of Christopher Reeve. He's got that the moral center and compass that you want to have with Superman. But something talking about being a father, something that I can't relate to, Sam can't relate to, but that idea of how important it is to see a character like Jonathan Kent, or just parents in general, be a good role model for their son, who happens to be the most powerful being on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the fun part now about all this stuff is that, not just my son, even my daughter's also really into a lot of this stuff.
Sure.
We go and see pretty much every comic book movie aside from the Justice League that comes out, and she's actually really into art now. So she's, looking at the comics from kind of the same perspective that I look at them for the art. But sharing these things with them and kind of, talking about them and whatnot really kind of is awesome, because, you see your 4-year-old son's face when, Superman takes off for the first time and he's just in awe. Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh my God, that's amazing. And yeah, you kind of look deeper than just, again, as we said, the on the surface of, all powerful, shoot the laser beams and all that. But it's more to the moral code again of, he's Superman because, he's here to save people and protect people and do the right thing because it is the right thing, and not just for glory or for, because you're big, strong, and powerful. And then that kind of goes into, the sort of trying to save everybody, but you can't, and you got to take the little battles at sometimes, and just realize sometimes the small victories are more important than the big ones. And teaching those to your kids are, important. And using kind of some of these stories as sort of, almost, you want to say how people use the Bible, there are life lessons sometimes in some of these things. And, Superman has that essence to it of, there's a photo actually Sam had tweeted out. It's the one where Superman's standing on a building with a girl who I believe is going to jump off, and he's just there for her.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things, like those are the little things that to me stand out the most that you kind of use as sort of moral guiding points of this is look, he's not saving, he's not fighting giant aliens, he's not beating up Darkseid, he's not doing all these great huge heroic things. He's there for somebody because he cares. Things like that that stand out more. And they're great, and that's kind of awesome thing to use now as a parent. I can kind of point to and kind of use as life lessons almost.
That is from Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's All-Star Superman.
Yes.
Yes, you're always stronger than you think you are.
Yes.
The other sequence,
exactly.
which Jeff Johns and Dale Eaglesham referenced during their Justice Society run, when Earth 2 Superman, or not Earth 2, Kingdom Come Superman catches somebody and he's just like, giving up never helped anyone miss. Those are both great moments, that you get the... there's a moment in, I want to say it's Batman number 36. Maybe, yeah, it was with, where Batman, Bruce and Selina go on a date night with Clark and Lois. And there's a moment, they're describing each other very fondly, separately, because they would never do it while the other person's there, because of course they wouldn't. But the Bruce is like, imagine the, he's... And there was something Corey said as I pull up the image on my phone and try to discreetly act like I know the quote right off the top of my head.
That's what you're talking about. It's they're both.
But no, like Corey was like, just because you can't always win the big battles doesn't mean you shouldn't try. You have to try, which is from Charles Soule's run on Swamp Thing of all places. That the Superman issue there. I want to say it was issue 27. But yeah, the Bruce quote where he's just like, imagine that, always being on the outside, the pain that would always come from being on the outside, and yet he took that pain and became a symbol of hope. That's Superman for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. And yeah, I mean, there's no other better way to say it. Like that sums it up, I think, perfectly. Yeah.
Now, speaking of Batman and Superman, something that always has fascinated me ever since I heard Frank Miller refer to Superman as the good soldier and Batman as the terrorist, and why they would never be like world's finest team-up buddies. My thing is, where do you fall? Like, what is your ideal relationship with Batman and Superman? Because, you can do whatever you want in comics, and we've seen it all across the board. But my thing is, I like the, I've always joked the Watchtower, they're having, like high school lunch kind of deal where everyone wants to hang out with Superman. Batman's the guy who wants to sit by himself, and the Questioner would probably sit next to him and spout conspiracy theories, and Batman's like, get the fuck away from me. But, like, where does that friendship kind of fall for you? Like, how would Batman and Superman interact in a Kyle Matthews joint?
Yeah, it's funny. I grew up watching Super Friends, and everybody's like, oh, look, they're the best of friends and they get along and everybody's happy. And, to me, that's just not the way it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
They're always portrayed as friends, but I just don't see that because they're such polar opposites.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of, a lot of times you see kind of Batman is so much a dick to Superman that you just like, let's just get it over with. Like, there's no way Batman, let's be honest, there's no way Batman's beating Superman in a real fight, no matter how many gadgets he has.
Mm-hmm.
Superman can just, punch a hole through his face and it's over. But I think deep down, like Greg Pak's run where he kind of started it off where they were younger and had this kind of rivalry build up kind of made sense. To where, because again, they are polar opposites, but it's like two people trying to get to the same goal, but want to do it their own way. Mm-hmm. It's like you're both trying to do the same thing, but you both think your way is better.
And they're both
at times it can be infuriating because it's how some people write it. but it's a weird relationship
Yeah.
because it's the two bigs, and it's hard to make the two biggest guys in the room, coexist on an equal plane.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that, from my, kind of idea of it, is that Superman, I think when it comes down to it, and a lot of it comes from the Frank Miller effect, wants to be friends with Bruce Wayne. Like, he wants to shine a light on the dark. Batman, on the other hand, probably wants to in a way, but his thing is so guarded. He's so shut down from everything else. So I love in the moments where they have the quiet, blinking, almost miss them moments together. The friendships where it's like Batman can't really compliment Superman, but he can kind of compliment Superman. Like,
it's funny. Actually, right before this, I was downstairs with my son. We were watching the animated series. We were watching the 3-part World's Finest, and there's actually a moment where Superman saves Lois Lane and Batman, and Superman goes, I forgot the word. I don't know exactly word for word, but it was something along the lines of, I saved you, and he goes, yeah, I know, and just flies off, and it's like, no, thank you. Like, what the fuck? And it's just like, he's that much of a dick. But yeah, it's that always having that guard up of, I think that's what kind of gets me at times. It's like, dude, just let your guard down. Like, Superman is trying. He's there for you. He's that friend that you want to have because he's there. He's there if you need him. There to listen, open up. Essentially, if you want to say shoulder to cry on. Whereas Batman's just like, leave me the fuck alone. I'm fine. When you even know he's not fine.
Mm-hmm.
And if he could learn to just, open up, things might be a little bit better for him. But he doesn't think so because, everything that, is his backstory is, it doesn't let it happen.
Yeah. Superman, like everybody else he encounters, wants to save Bruce Wayne, and I think, with every kind of moment they spend together, like I said, it's so tragically and beautifully done in The Dark Knight Returns. I've said it a million times, but and people have kind of, the vilifying Superman in that as the government stooge or whatnot.
Yep.
But so beautifully, something I feel like is kind of missed is that moment where Batman is basically dead, has the heart attack. And all Batman's done the entire book is shit on Clark, shit on his choices, shit on Superman, shit on the idea of Superman, and everything he stood for, and sees him as nothing but a traitor and no friend of his. And in his death, and Superman's got a fucking black eye and a fat lip from Kryptonite arrow,
just completely just shit kicked out of him, and yet he can still say a good thing about him.
And not even that. It's just as he's holding this old, dead, broken down Bruce Wayne, he refuses to let anybody touch him. Like, he's still protective of him after all of that.
Yeah.
And that is a perfect moment. And of course, the funeral with the wink and being like, letting him kind of, operate on his own.
And that just kind of goes to get back to, again, speaking about, his morals, and that's what you want a person to be, no matter how bad sometimes a person can, I think everybody's kind of run into somebody having a friend where they shit on you, or, they've done something wrong to you, or just kind of made you feel sour. And if you can kind of turn the other cheek and kind of go, you know what, they have their moments, but I see the better in them. I see, I still see the good in those people. And it's kind of how Superman views humanity.
Yeah.
He kind of says, you know what, yeah, there are some that are, awful and do terrible things, but as the sum don't equal the whole. The whole are better, and he sees it and he wants to protect it no matter what. And I think that ultimately was what is still so great about him.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much sums it up perfectly there, Kyle. As we wrap up here, give the kids listening at home, and when I say reading list, I just mean just recommendations. It doesn't have to be just comic books. Give the kids at home a couple things that you would give as a starter's pack for Superman, whether it's TV, movies, comics. Give them just a handful of stuff if they're listening to this episode that you would direct them towards to read or watch.
Well, I mean, you got to start with Christopher Reeve Superman.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a little dated for some people today, but like to me, that's number one. Animated series, I think, ultimately holds up to this day.
Yeah.
It's it's a great start, for especially for kids who can't sit through some live action movies. But reading wise, I mean, you have your staples, but I kind of point to some that are kind of not as mentioned as much. I really always like the Alan Moore.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, they're on the tip of my tongue.
The Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow.
What Happened to Man Tomorrow, and also
For the Man Who Has Everything.
For the Man Who Has Everything, yes. Those two always were, and I think actually For the Man Who Has Everything would be almost a good third movie for the Zack Snyder Superman movies.
Mm-hmm. That's a great story. Yeah.
I think that's one that I'm kind of like, that would work, but they would screw it up somehow. But yeah, those, and obviously you have your staples of, All-Star Superman is, I think key. Anything by John Burns. Yeah, I mean, yeah, All-Star Superman. Even Tim Sale's Superman.
Yeah.
For as weird looking as some people think it is, I always felt it was a bit Norman Rockwell type.
Mm-hmm.
Which was very much the goal.
Yeah. He was a bit, I don't know, some people say pudgy, but
He's a
it was a different take. I mean, it's definitely different, but and obviously Red Sun. I don't know how I haven't talked about Red Sun. Yeah. I mean, I think Vernon talked about it enough, but that one is definitely, to me, top 3.
Oh, it's great. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Mark Miller, man, and I like his take on things. And he's obviously a monster Superman fan. So, well, there you have it, kids. That is check those books out. Some of the stuff hasn't been talked about as much on the show, so those are good picks to watch or read. Kyle, as always, great having you on. A friendship born of comics and Superman that continues to this day. So thanks again for coming on the show. And Kiss. Of course, the greatest rock band of 1975 to 1979.
And Dread and RoboCop.
And Dread and RoboCop. All that. God's favorite movie, the perfect movie, RoboCop. Yes. So this is the last episode of 2017.
I feel special.
Yeah. Yeah, you win a prize. You win, I don't know. You win best of end of the year 2017 prize. You can put that on your Twitter profile. Yeah. But put that in your Twitter profile or your Facebook mentions there and get all the likes. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on. Like I said, you're always, whenever I start some kind of crazy, weird new project, you're always on the list of guests to come on. Yeah, I think the Superman podcast is going to take a bit of a break in 2018, just as a heads up. We've got, I think, 6 solid episodes to kind of form a basis, and the Justice League movie coming out. We talked a lot with Chris from Geek Out, so we're gonna take a little bit of a break. Sam and I break
Nobody
off.
can follow me up anyway.
That's true. No one can follow Kyle Matthews. So we're gonna touch base with the other stuff, and we'll always. Great thing about this is there's no really kind of finite number of episodes. We can do this thing forever, so there's always going to be more Superman episodes. But there's going to be a bit of a break in 2018. Do something else, and then we'll always hop back in with any kind of big Superman news, and especially as more news for potential movies and sequels and adaptations come about. Sam and I will always be around with guests or information to talk about, the Man of Steel. So thanks again for listening, kids. Thanks again, Kyle. Thanks again, Sam, as always, for sticking out with me here and doing the show. You all have a great night and read some
Look to the
Superman.
sky.
Yeah, look to the sky. Read some Superman.
Ba, 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 ba.
This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.